Hey, it's Austin from Wildbound Cabin Co. In this video, I wanted to show you guys how the cabin is mounted to the truck. So I've had a couple people ask questions about what hardware we use or how the cabin is actually attached. So I figured since I'm reattaching it today, this would be a great idea to make a video and show you step by step exactly how the cabin is mounted to the truck. So here it is. There's a couple different ways that the cabin can be mounted on the top of the truck. So for those of you that haven't seen it, here's the cabin. And these rails here sit directly on top of the truck bed rails. So some people have built cabins that go down in the bed. We build ours to sit on the top here, which keeps them lighter and a little simpler. So the very first step, and this is going to be painful for some people, but you gotta drill holes in your truck bed in the top rails. I really like to drill these holes with the bed liner off so that you have access to them, and drill them, and then I make sure to spray paint them again so that they don't rust. So drilled 4 holes, and on to the next step. Okay, so now we've decided to bolt the cabin to the truck bed. Let's talk about a couple different ways that we can go about doing that. So, what I did on my previous truck, on the green truck, is I used something called carriage bolts. And how we did this is I just simply drilled straight through the wood frame on the cabin, straight through the truck bed, and then I inserted these bolts down through. So the cabin framing was here, the truck bed was there. And then because I was able to access the underside of the truck bed, I could simply just throw a washer on, throw a nut on, and come in there with a wrench and tighten up that nut. There's a couple reasons that I can't do that exactly the same on the Tacoma. And the first and main one is that the Tacoma's plastic bed liner actually extends up over the sides of the bed versus my old truck, it just went up to the sides. It didn't go up over the side. So I like that it goes up over the sides, and I want to maintain that. The second reason why it might be a little bit tricky to do this type of a method on the Tacoma is that the Tacoma's bed rails are very narrow, and a washer might not quite fit on the inside. The inside is pretty small, and I think it's actually a little bit narrower than a washer. So, because of this, it gives me the opportunity to come up with something a little more creative, and I have some ideas. So, let me show you what I've got in mind. This is the fun part, which is lifting the cabin up into the air. Now, these things don't weigh a ton, so theoretically you could probably do this with 4 fairly strong people. But it's just me here today, so I prefer to just use some chain hoists. Luckily, I have a garage that I can hoist things up in. And I like this because it gives me a very controlled method for lifting it, even though it's maybe not the fastest. I like just to be able to be careful and to have a lot of control over it. And this works pretty well. So time to hoist it up. All right, so the cabin is mounted on the truck. It takes a little bit of finagling to get it exactly where it is and get it all aligned correctly. But once it's on, it's, where it needs to be, and you shouldn't have to align it again. So at this point, the next step, now that we have the cabin exactly where it needs to be, we've come in here and we find those holes we drilled earlier. And now we're just going to drill up through the cabin itself, through the wood. And that way the cabin is aligned exactly where it needs to be. All right, so I figured we'd check back in and kind of go over what we have here. Since you last saw me, I combed my hair and I made an iced latte. And I also got some work done on the cabin install here. So let me show you these things. So I'm pretty happy with how these things turned out. In case you're a little bit confused still, what this is essentially a custom-made nut that is going to fit under the bed of the truck, and the bolt is going to come right down in and thread into it, and that's what's going to mount the cabin on. So let me show you that process just so that you'll understand that. But I used a rubberized coating on here. It's like a truck bed liner, so that's really nice, and thick rubber coating on there, so that shouldn't scratch the paint too badly. And yeah, I'm really happy with how these turned out. So back out of the truck here, you can see I have the bed liner loosely in again. It's not fully attached yet, but I needed to throw it in there because I needed to drill the holes through the bed liner there, which match up with the holes in the truck bed itself. So those 4 holes are drilled. And now you can see probably a little bit better what I was talking about, where the nuts are going to be up in under here. And actually this one I almost could reach just because there is a hole here, but I would have to cut the hole about that much bigger, and I didn't really want to do that. So this truck, the bed liner extends up over the bed rails, and so that's why we're making our little captive nut system. All right, so I got some double stick Gorilla Tape on my little captive nuts. This means what I'm going to be able to do is get that nut under the bed rail there where it needs to be, get it in place, and then tighten it down with a bolt, and that should stick it right where it needs to be. And it'll just hold itself under there. So while that is there, I can reinstall the bed liner, and then my little captive nut will just be stuck right up under there, and I can go straight down with my bolt, and hopefully it won't fall out. And that's the plan. Okay, so I've got my captive nut stuck down under there. So what I can do now is insert a bolt straight from above. That'll catch the nut underneath. And there we go. Nothing you can see from the side, and I'm threaded in. So that is how I'm gonna cinch the cabin down on top of the truck bed, and hopefully that works out. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So the only thing that would make me happier is if it actually works. All right, it's on. So the bolts all lined up pretty good. I had to, it took a little bit of finagling, of course, to get things all lined up. But ultimately, they're all clamped down in, and the cabin is securely mounted. It is not going to go anywhere at all. And my little captive nut system worked pretty good. So the bolt goes through the cabin frame, like I mentioned, and the captive nut, those little rectangle black pieces, is sitting in there, cinching up against the cabin, completely hidden away. You can't even see it. If you were to loosen these bolts up, the cabin would come off again. But there's these 4 bolts here, and you barely notice them. They don't get in the way, and super secure. So I'd call that a win, and that is how the cabin is mounted here on the Tacoma. So thanks for watching this little video, and stay tuned for more cabin adventures.